Hello everyone. In this video I just want to give you a few updates about the assignments that you completed in week 2 and just a heads up about what's happening for the rest of this week. You have completed the Browsing Communication Research assignment for me. A couple of important things to know about this assignment is one of the reasons why I wanted you to do this assignment was so that you gain some familiarity with using the library database, that you start to get a glimpse of how scholarly journals are found in the library, and the kinds of articles that get published in communication research. So I wanted you to think about the articles as a whole, and to give you an idea of the kinds of topics and approaches that communication scholars take toward research. There were a lot of good points brought up by people throughout the assignment. I just want to touch on a few of them. Many students mentioned that one of the things they noticed as across the boards was that most of these articles have extensive research. This is going to be true of all academic scholarly sources that you may read. Extensive research both in terms of reading other people's studies and also of collecting their own data or conducting their own analysis. That the articles tend to have similar formatting. They're written in kind of similar ways. They use headings. An introduction comes first, then sometimes there's a literature review. This formatting is something we'll be spending more attention on in some latter weeks. And then lastly, people mentioned, and this is a really important point, that most of the works that they found were original, scholarly, and they presented a kind of new way of looking at things with data and evidence to back it up. So this is sort of the hallmark of what makes something a scholarly source. An academic scholarly source is that it is there's evidence in it that the author has conducted their own research, has created their own argument, or offered a kind of new way of thinking about things. They've added something to the scholarly conversation on that topic. Again, we'll also talk more about that, as well as you may have sort of heard about that or listened more about that in the PowerPoint on different types of sources. Students mentioned that there was a wide variety of different kinds of topics that were covered in these different communication journals. As I've mentioned before in the past, I think personally that's one of the things I really like about communication is that almost anything you want to study could be studied. In the field of communication, as long as you take a particular approach to it or angle on it. People also notice that sometimes a particular journal might have a common theme to all the articles. That occasionally happens. It's not always the case, but sometimes there will be a journal that has a theme, usually related to some really relevant and important topic or event that has occurred. So I think for some people they noticed that there was one journal that had a particular issue dedicated to the Me Too movement, for instance. That these topics tended to be very relevant to current events or trends, but offered a kind of scholarly perspective on those. They sometimes addressed controversial issues, and there were a lot of articles that focus on things like media or the internet or social media. Certainly these are intimately tied to what we mean by communication in our contemporary moment. And so it doesn't really matter what your concentration is, that the technologies surrounding these forms of communication are going to be integrated into other kinds of topics as well. And then just a few notes about the assignment itself. Some issues with the APA citations. I'm not grading down on those at this point because we haven't gone over citations in the class yet. We will do that in a couple weeks. But I highly recommend that you start to take a look at citation guidelines. the source that I'm going to recommend you use is called OWL Purdue. You can Google it, and it does have an extensive APA citation guide that you can use. And then just make sure you're following directions, doing all parts of the assignment in order to receive full credit for the assignment. The last thing I'll mention is just make sure you go and read the comments. There's not a ton of comments on this particular assignment, but there'll be a few little things to think about for future assignments. As the assignments develop and grow, if it's a more extensive assignment, you'll have more extensive feedback. So just make sure you're looking for that feedback so that you know what I'm looking for. And that will become particularly important when we move into the literature review assignments. I just want to mention a couple of things about the Unit 1 test. For the most part, people did quite well on this. Hopefully you found it to be pretty easy. I think you'll find the next unit test to be at least a little bit more difficult in terms of content. It's a little more content specific. So as you're watching the videos for this week and listening to the PowerPoints, I would recommend you take notes on those. That should help you with the Unit 2 test. But there were a few questions that came up as iffy. So the first one, this one was missed by quite a few people, and I just want to draw your attention to it because it's pretty important. It says, part of the class discussion will require you to be a discussion leader. Which of the following is not something you should know in relationship to this part of the course? You should know that leading discussion is worth 3 times as much in points for the week as being a respondent. So be sure to check the weekly schedule for who's the discussion leaders for the week. And if it's you, make sure you do that assignment. You can expect to be a discussion leader at least twice during the semester. There may be opportunities, maybe, if you missed 1 week, the week that you're supposed to be a discussion leader, that you might be able to make that up, but it will depend on a variety of factors, and don't count on it. You should also know that you should be looking at the weekly schedule to find out who's leading discussion. And you should know that the discussion board is actually worth 20% of your course grade, not 5. So it's a big deal to miss this portion of the assignment. And it's also an easy way to make to bring your overall grade up in the course. So it's one of those things that's going to happen every week. Just write it in your calendar, plan for it, and make sure that you're doing it. This one, actually, I had marked the answer incorrectly. So if you looked back at your responses and the correct answer, you would have, it might have seemed funny to you. So just so that you know, I have changed that so that people will receive credit for it. Its research differs from other everyday ways of knowing in that that the correct answer is that it seeks to confirm already held beliefs. So the question is worded funny. So I ended up giving credit no matter what you answered to this one, because after I reread it, I thought that's kind of a confusing question, and I can see why people would have gotten it wrong. The key word here is differs. So how is research different from everyday ways of knowing? It is different because it doesn't do this. Everyday ways of knowing tends to confirm already held beliefs, and research takes a skeptical attitude toward what we already know in an attempt to investigate it and really analyze that. And then finally, true or false, most of the topics research in comm studies today differs significantly from the topics examined in the 1980s. The correct answer was false. So in the PowerPoint where we talked about communication studies topics, I made mention that while certain things have changed, for instance, we look at social media today, and they certainly weren't looking at that in the 1980s, that the idea of media and media technologies has remained constant since the 1980s. In fact, one interesting thing is how little the topics in communication studies have changed even since the 1980s. That said, enough people missed this that I just thought the point was maybe not clear in the PowerPoint, so I gave people an additional point for this question as well. If you have specific questions about your exam or any of the assignments or the feedback, please don't hesitate to get in contact with me. And then lastly, I just wanted to highlight a particular response to the short answer question. The most important thing to think about with the short answer questions is that even though I say in your own words, I still want you to be referencing course material in your responses. So this was an example of a really good answer in that it brought in the specifics of the course material in discussing what research is and why it was important. So I don't want to just kind of know what you think. I want to know what you've learned from reading the course material, watching the PowerPoints, watching the videos. So make sure that when you're writing your short answers, you're also drawing on course material in those answers. Just a heads up, a couple of things coming up very quickly. Your literature review research topic assignment. This went up late, and so I'm giving you till next Wednesday, 9/26, to post it. It's actually super easy in the sense that you're just write a paragraph for me, and you're going to post it in a discussion forum. You can see the guidelines for this under week 3 on the weekly schedule. You also have your regular discussion board, the scavenger hunt. Keep in mind that discussion leaders should be posting by today, by Friday. Everyone else needs to have their responses in by Sunday. And finally, you have a short assignment for me. I expect this assignment to take around an hour or less. This assignment is called Understanding Sources, and it is due on Sunday. So keep a lookout for that. And on Monday, I will post another update just with a heads up for the next week, upcoming week 4.